Welcome to the Painting Coach, and today we're going to be painting a miniature that might be small in stature, but is absolutely huge in terms of the rule of cool. Yes, that's right, it is Buri Aegnirssen, the thrice consumed, who has fought his way out of being eaten by Tyranids on numerous times and now wears them on his back. A huge thanks to Games Workshop for sending me this model. Let's get painting. So I've primed the model black to get painting, but I've also actually not glued the Tyranid onto Buri's backpack. That's going to make things a lot easier to paint. I've just modelled it on there, clipped it into place, and it pops right off. The first thing we'll do is paint all of the Tyranid scales and anything that's going to be purple on the model. So the colour I'm using for this is Naggaroth Night. Now this is a lovely purple colour, but you are going to need 2 coats. Thin the paint with a little bit of water to get nice even coverage. I'm also going to do all of the spear whilst I've got the purple out. So whilst I've based all the plates with Naggaroth Night, I'm also going to base all of the spear using Naggaroth Night as well. Next up, I'm going to take some Phoenician Purple and I'm going to start highlighting. I'm not going to do this in a particularly tidy way. I'm going to be fairly rough with it. What I'm going to make sure I do is paint down the scales so that I get more colour towards the bottom than I do at the top. I'm using a size 3 brush for this. I'm not worried about it being particularly crisp. I just want to make sure I get a little bit of differentiation in colour. I'm going to follow the box art to make sure that I get the right angles and the right little bits of light and dark across the spear. So using that Phoenician Purple, I'm just going to blend this down towards the bottom of the centre of the spear and up towards the top of the spear and into the middle a little bit. Now this isn't a smooth blend. This is just adding layers of paint on just to kind of build up the map of where I want the lights to be. And I'll show you right at the end how to blend them together. Next, we're going to take some Xereus Purple, and this is where I'm starting to build some definition. So what I'm looking to do is paint this in nice crisp lines down towards the bottom of those armor plates. I'm also going to edge highlight them a little bit by dragging the brush across them. The reason I'm doing this is I'm starting to build up some of that striated texture on all of the chitin that's very clear across all the Tyranids. We'll do exactly the same on the spear with the Xereus Purple as well. Again, painting it towards the bottom of the center, towards the top of the tip, and just blending it in towards the middle on those 2 edges as well. You can really start seeing it brightening up quite nicely now. Using some Genestealer Purple, I'm going to paint this inside the Xereus Purple from the previous stage. So I've swapped to a slightly smaller brush with a much better point for this. It's my size 1 Artist Opus, Series S. If you want to get your own Artist Opus brushes, use the link in the description. You can get up to 5% off as well with my special code. They're fantastic brushes. What I'm looking to do here is, as you can see, paint those lines in, making sure it's inside and really building up that texture. We'll then take that Genestealer Purple and add that to the spear blade. Again, we'll focus on painting it down that centre part and again up towards the top. Now this does look a little bit rough, like I said, but we will smooth it over later on. To finish off all the highlighting, I'm going to take a little bit of Slaanesh Grey and I'm looking to edge highlight the edge of all the plates. So I'm just dragging my brush across these areas. You can see I've got a very good point and I haven't got much paint on there at all. So this just makes it a lot easier to control. I'm not going to focus on the vertical lines at this point. I'm just going to leave it here. If you want to add some in later, you can, but I'm really happy with how this has turned out. We'll then use the Slaanesh Grey to edge highlight that spear across all of the sharp edges, and that then will start to give you a rough idea of what this is going to look like when it's finished. But just having that Slaanesh Grey really does help frame it and let you see where it's going. Moving on to Buri then, let's get that cloak of flayed tyrannid flesh done. So I'm going to base all of this using Rakarth flesh. Now it is going to take me 2 coats in some areas, maybe even 3 depending on how thin you make the paint. What I've noticed with Rakarth flesh is that it can cover okay, but can also be very lumpy. So it's better to over thin it slightly and do an extra coat than it is to have loads of lumpy dusty bits on the miniature. Now to introduce that pink colour, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Pink Horror and Rakarth Flesh, and I'm going to paint this over the entirety of the cloak. So everything we painted Rakarth Flesh in the last step, we're now going to paint with this mix. And the reason I didn't just base it with this is because it would have taken me a lot more coats to get that nice even coverage. So it's easier to base with Rakarth and then add this mix on. Once that's completely dry, it's time to build up the highlight again using Rakarth Flesh. Now, what I'm looking to do here is stipple this across the entirety of the cloak, so it just gives that impression of textured flayed flesh. which is basically what it is from whichever Tyrannid Buri has taken it. And what I'm looking to do here is not necessarily put smooth, crisp highlights on. I'm just tapping my brush across the edges of the model, just putting lots and lots of dots of paint. This makes it nice and easy and straightforward, and just build this up gradually, working your way across all of that cloak, paying particular focus to all the raised folds that are going to catch the most light. I'll finish up that highlight with a little bit of pallid witch flesh. I'm just going to stipple this inside the Rakath flesh from the previous stage, just building up the brightness a little bit. In some areas, I'll put some little dots and dashes as well, just to signify where maybe things have caught on the cloak, just to add, again, more texture as we work across it. Next up, we'll base all of Buri's armour using Stegadon Scale Green. Be careful around the cloak that you've already finished, but generally this is a nice, easy and straightforward step. Just make sure you've got a nice even coat across there. So if you do need to use 2 to get that, then make sure you do. All I'm doing is painting this in as a block colour. I'm not going to highlight it or shade it just yet. I'm going to paint the silver first. And the silver, I'm going to use dark aluminium from Vallejo Model Colour. If you haven't got this, you can use something like Lead Belcher from Citadel. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem using that at all. And what I'm looking to do is just get all those silver parts done. There's the mechanical parts on his arm, there's his mask, and also there's the haft of that massive, massive spear that he's using. Next, I'm going to wash all of the armor and all of the silver elements using Nuln Oil. Now, it's important here to make sure that you get into all the recesses. However, do be careful that it doesn't pull too heavily and you get a nice ugly black oil slick. You don't want that. You just want to keep it moving. So as it dries, keep an eye on it. Don't overload your brush and make sure you just paint it on rather than slop it on. We'll highlight all of that silver using chrome from Vallejo Model Air. Now, it's really important that the Nuln Oil wash is completely dry before you do this, so just take your time. We're looking to catch those most raised edges that are facing upwards. We're going to catch the most light. And where you can, drag your brush to get that nice crisp highlight. Next, we'll base all of the gold, and the colour I'm using for this is Dragon's Gold from Two Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, then you can use Retributor Armour. It's exactly the same colour, and it works exactly the same way. So in terms of things we're looking to get here, we've got the one part of Buri's mask, we've also got his mechanical arm, we've got the hilt of the spear and also the belt buckle, and all of the runes across the armour as well. To shade all of the gold, we'll take some Reikland Flesh Shade. Now this is a nice easy step. All we need to do is paint this Reikland Flesh Shade over all of the gold, taking your time, particularly around those bits you've already finished. And we just want to make sure we get it into all the recesses. Again, very similar to the Nuln Oil wash. We don't want it to flood anywhere. We just want to give a nice crisp shade around all of those elements. Once that wash is completely dry, we'll put the first highlight on using Glistening Gold from Two Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, Liberator Gold is absolutely fine as well. Generally, what I'm looking to do here is drag my brush across the sharp edges to get a nice crisp highlight. Where I can't do this, I'm just going to very carefully paint it in. So, for example, on that face mask, we just need to be very careful with how we apply the Liberator Gold, making sure that we don't get it into any of those recesses. The same also goes for that massive belt buckle and also the mechanical arm. The final highlight on the gold is going to be with white gold from Procurel. Now, this is a bit of an optional stage. You don't have to do it, but I really do like it. I'm looking to just dot and dab across all the sharp corners of the elements of gold here, and that'll just give you a nice bright gold that really stands out. I'm also going to take this and paint over the snakes on the belt buckle just so that they're a much brighter gold than the rest of the gold around it, and again, that's going to help it really stand out. Moving on to all the leather, I'm going to base all of this using Dryad Bark. So we've got all of the leather straps holding the tyrannid teeth, we've got the grip on the spear, we've got the belt, we've got the pouch, and we've got that pistol on its holster as well. Once we've finished basing it, we'll just go straight in with highlighting, and the colour I'm going to use is Gorthor Brown. I'm looking to drag my brush across the sharp edges of this where I can, and where I can't drag it, I'm just going to very carefully paint it in. So again, very good tip on your brush and not too much paint on there either. Generally, you can get some nice crisp highlights with this, so it should be a fairly straightforward step. I'm going to base Buri's undersuit now using Stone. Now, I used Rakath Flesh earlier to put a base coat down. If you haven't done this, because I didn't tell you to, so that's my bad, then just take your time putting some Stone across these areas. I'm going to get away with one coat, but if you haven't got this, you may need 2 or even 3. Just make sure the paint's thin so that you don't get some really nasty looking textures. I'm then going to shade all of this using Agrax Earth Shade, making sure I work it into the recesses and making sure that I haven't got any areas on the model where this is flooding, because I don't want that kind of effect. I just want it to darken those recesses nicely. When that's completely dry, I'll go back in with the Carrick Stone and just highlight that undersuit back up, making sure that I get some nice crisp highlights and some nice crisp edges where I need to by dragging the brush. And that's enough for highlighting the undersuit. It's not a massive part of this miniature, so we don't need to go overboard. I'll highlight all the black elements next, and the colour I'm going to use for this is Eshin Grey. So what I'm looking to do is just paint this over the most raised areas. So we've got some good padding on the feet there to do. We've also got all the tyrannid teeth as well. So I'm going to drag the brush along those really sharp edges to get that nice crisp highlight. If you are a little bit untidy or it does go down a little bit thick, you can always fix it with some black paint. The last highlight on all of the black is with Dawnstone, and what we're going to do is keep this inside the Eshin Grey from the previous stage. Now the Dawnstone is quite a bit brighter, so we don't want to go too crazy with this. We just want to go and put a little bit on there, using the shape of the model and dragging our brush where we can. As you can see, I've got barely any paint on my brush. This just gives me a lot more control. To base Buri's one bare arm, which is his left arm, I'm going to take some Cadian Flesh Tone. Again, I'd already done this in Rakarth Flesh, but if you haven't, that's fine. You'll just need 2 or 3 coats to cover it, and this will give you a nice, strong base. I'm then going to take some Reikland Flesh Shade and wash this all over that fleshy area, really making sure that I get it into the recesses, and particularly around the metal augmentations that he's got, but also making sure I don't accidentally spill it over the silver as well. When that's completely dry, I'll go back to Cadian Flesh Tone and start to highlight the arm back up, leaving that Reikland Flesh Shade in all of the recesses. Now, this paint is fairly thin, but I haven't got a huge amount on my brush, so it just helps me build up that colour a little bit more. If the paint was too thick, then I'd probably run the risk of making mistakes and getting it where I didn't want it. Then we'll take some Kislev Flesh and highlight around all of the most prominent parts. So we've got the fingers, we've got the wrist, which has got some raised joints on there. We've also got all the scars around that metal augmentation running through the forearm as well. And the last highlight on the flesh is a little bit of flayed one flesh just on the most prominent areas across those fingers, the knuckles, any areas where we've got some prominent scarring, again, just to help it stand out. If you need to, go in and tidy up the armor with some Stegadon Scale Green. Otherwise, we'll take some Thunderhawk Blue and start highlighting. Now, where I can, I'm going to drag my brush across the model to get a fairly crisp highlight. Now, what I'm very conscious of is the Thunderhawk Blue isn't that great a paint in terms of coverage. So these highlights are going on a little bit thick, but that's okay because we will add some more just to add some definition later on. If you make any huge mistakes, then go back in with Stegadon Scale Green just to correct them. The next highlight is a 50-50 mix of Thunderhawk Blue and Fenrisian Grey. Now, this is really starting to get a little bit light, so we want to keep these highlights nice, thin and crisp and make sure they are inside the Thunderhawk Blue from the previous stage. So where I can, I'm going to drag my brush across those sharp edges of the model. Where I can't, I'm going to make sure I've got a good point. And you can see here the point on these Artis Opus Series S brushes are fantastic, so I'm getting a really, really nice highlight out of them. The last highlight is with pure Fenrisian Grey, and this is going to be a little bit more of a spot highlight. So the key here is to keep it inside the previous highlight and also to use it fairly sparingly. So we want to just add some dots on the brightest parts where the armor is going to shine. We don't want to go too crazy. Let's go back to that purple blade and start to tidy it up a little bit then. So it's not the worst looking blade in the world, but we do just need to smooth that transition a little bit. So to do this, make sure you've got Naggaroth Night, Xereus Purple and Genestealer Purple on your palette. Thin them down and just work them into each other so you've got 5 different shades really. And because you put a bit of water in there, they should be nice and thin. The first thing we're going to do is take a 50-50 mix of the Genestealer Purple and the Xereus Purple. And again, I've not got very much on my brush at all here. I'm just going to feather this into the transition between the two colours, let it dry and see what it looks like to see if I'm happy. Now, you can use this in a glaze consistency if you want. For me, I'm just a little bit more than that. For me, it's a little bit thicker than that because I just want to get it done a little bit quicker. So it's not going to be as smooth a transition. But generally, it's a nice way of just pumping some of the vibrancy up by putting things like the Xereus Purple over some of the lighter colours. It really does help boost it. And as it dries, it'll start to bring that blend together quite nicely. I'm then going to go in with the Genestealer Purple and really start to re-emphasize some of these highlights, in particular towards the end of the blade and also towards the middle of those side highlights. And then when I'm happy with all the highlighting, I'm going to go back in with the Slaanesh Grey and do the edge highlights again. And again, this is what's going to pull everything together. So the Slaanesh Grey is significantly brighter than a lot of the elements on the blade. So just take your time with this, be careful, make sure you've got a good steady hand, brace your arms or your wrists, whichever's most comfortable, to get those nice crisp lines. Next, I'm going to base the lights, the eyes on Buri, and I'm also going to use this to give the spearhead a little bit more of a reflective surface on the edges. So I'm using AK white for this. Use whatever bright white you've got. For the lamp on Buri's chest, I'm just going to cover this. For the eyes, I'm going to very carefully paint this in. And then for that spearhead, I'm just going to put some dots on the sharpest areas and also where those lines intersect, so I get a nice bright highlight. For Buri's lamp and his blue eye, I'm going to take a little bit of Frostheart contrast paint and just paint this over those areas, and straight away you get a really nice simple finish. For his red eye, I'm going to take some Bal red and just very carefully put a small amount into the eye socket. Now, for the skull and teeth of the Tyrannid, I've previously based them with Dawnstone and the teeth in Carrickstone. I'm now going to take some Agrax Earthshade and wash this over the entirety of the area, making sure it gets into all of those recesses so you get a nice shade, but don't put so much in that you run the risk of spilling it over everything else. To highlight the grey part of the skull, I'm going to take some grey cere and just drag my brush across the most prominent edges. Now, this is a nice way of getting a bright highlight. I'm not putting a huge amount of effort into this, but it'll just help it stand out on the tabletop. For the teeth, I'm going to take some Carrickstone, and generally what I'm looking to do is just leave some of that shade in all the recesses. So just take your time. Again, very little paint and a good point on your brush. And there we have it. Buri Aegnirssen is ready for the tabletop. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. Check out some of my other Leagues of Votann content as well. I really do like them as a race. I really do like them as a set of models as well. And this guy looks absolutely phenomenal. He really is going to be a standout on the tabletop. So thank you so much. I'll see you next time.